It's March 637. On the walls of Ctesiphon, Persian defenders stand with arrows nocked and ready. Below them, Arab siege engines advance relentlessly toward their positions. There is a thunderous sound, and a voice cries out that a break in the wall has been made. The outer wall crumbles. Persian horns blare their warning as Arab warriors pour through the gap. The defenders abandon their posts, rushing to meet the attackers with spears and swords. Knowing this to be their last stand, the Persians hurl themselves into the breach. This is the critical moment in the battle for the greatest city of the East. The fate of the Persian capital hangs in the balance as the Arab armies press forward. Join us as we tell the story of the Muslim siege of Ctesiphon. Before Islam, Arabia's tribes were locked in endless cycles of violence. Blood feuds over water, honor, and power turned the desert into a battleground. These clashes honed warriors into lethal fighters men who could endure thirst, navigate barren landscapes, and kill without hesitation. That was the fragmented world shattered by the rise of Muhammad. Tribal identities melted into one faith, Islam. But with the death of the Prophet came rebellion. The tribes renounced their allegiance to Medina and refused to obey the new order, and the first caliph, Abu Bakr, responded with pitiless efficiency. The rebellious tribes were smashed, their fighters absorbed into an army forged by fire. Born out of these brutal wars of unification was the Rashidun Caliphate, an empire that was going to challenge the greatest powers of the age. By 634, this army turned outward. Abu Bakr had his sights on the weakened giants of Byzantium and Persia. His generals, Khalid ibn Al-Walid and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, led hardened Rashidun warriors north. Their campaigns through Roman and Persian lands culminated in the epic battles of Yarmouk and Qadisiyyah in 636. At Yarmouk, in Syria, the Muslim warriors under Khalid destroyed a Byzantine army at least 3 times their number. The Byzantines retreated, abandoning Syria to its fate. At the same time, at Qadisiyyah in Iraq, the Muslims under Sa'd faced the pride of Persia. Sassanid war elephants and armored cavalry clashed with Arab archers and zeal. After 4 days of carnage, Persian lines broke. Their general lay dead, and the sacred royal banner fell into Arab hands. The routed Persian army retreated east toward their capital, Ctesiphon. It was a headlong chase by the Arab forces, driven by momentum and divine fervor. But ahead lay a city guarded by trenches, rivers, walls, and centuries of imperial defiance. Thus, the siege of Ctesiphon was to test if desert warriors could conquer an empire's heart or die trying.
This is where our journey begins, a journey back in time. From the dawn of civilization in Mesopotamia to the rise of glorious empires, from the halo of fabled personalities to the shadows of ruthless regimes. Witness the drama of epic battles and the moments when the world stood still. Events that didn't destroy us, but defined us. We combine cutting-edge technology and artificial intelligence to resurrect legendary historical towns and retell ancient love stories. Underpinned by powerful music, you'll feel like you're part of it. Welcome to Epic Histories, where each chapter brings the past alive.
In 602, the Byzantine Emperor Maurice was toppled in a military coup. Khosrau II of Persia seized this opportunity when the Byzantine Empire weakened and launched a devastating campaign against his recent allies. Persian armies swept through Syria, captured Jerusalem, and invaded Egypt. For the first time in 3 centuries, Persian soldiers were triumphant on the banks of the Nile. But this triumph hid internal strife. 2 decades of conflict drained both empires. The Persian army, for all its elite cavalry and war elephants, was stretched out over conquered territories. Their aristocratic families vied with each other, undermining imperial authority. The Sassanid war machine, the most feared army in the known world, decayed from within. When Emperor Maurice was deposed and horribly murdered by the usurper Phocas in 602, the Byzantine Empire descended into chaos. Phocas reigned by terror for 8 years until Heraclius, son of the Exarch of Africa, set sail for Constantinople with a rebel fleet. Having overthrown Phocas in 610, Heraclius took power in Constantinople and engineered a spectacular reversal. His armies invaded Persian lands deep, annihilating their armies at Nineveh in 627. Khosrau II was overthrown and murdered, and Persia plunged into chaos. 9 pretenders occupied the throne within 4 years. Each king was weaker than his predecessor as the great noble houses carved out their own domains. Meanwhile, on the Arabian Peninsula, a transformation reshaped the political landscape. Prophet Muhammad united the warring tribes under the banner of Islam. Their military strength grew from decades of tribal warfare. These desert warriors mastered the art of swift cavalry strikes, while their infantry perfected disciplined unit tactics. Their light armor allowed rapid movement across vast distances, a skill that became decisive in the coming campaigns. In 632, Muhammad's death imperiled this unity. His closest friend, Abu Bakr, became the first caliph. The Ridda Wars challenged his authority at once. Tribe after tribe repudiated their oath. But Abu Bakr acted quickly to repress these rebellions. Under the lead of his most seasoned commander, Khalid ibn Al-Walid, the Rashidun Caliphate crushed all rebellions within 6 months. Unified in aim and toughened by battle, the tribal armies that had fought one another for so long started to turn on their mighty neighbors, the Byzantine and the Sassanid Empire. Under Abu Bakr's strategic direction, the Muslims launched simultaneous assaults on both empires. His generals received precise instructions: avoid prolonged sieges, strike at weak points, stay mobile. This was catastrophic for the slow-moving imperial armies. In 634, Abu Bakr died and was succeeded by Umar ibn al-Khattab, who continued to focus military efforts on Byzantium lands. The Battle of Yarmouk in 636 shattered Byzantine strength in Syria. Khalid ibn al-Walid outflanked a larger Byzantine army, severing their route of retreat. Byzantine cavalry charges were beaten back by disciplined Arab infantry. The Byzantine army melted away after 6 days of fighting. The whole of the Levant was now exposed to Muslim conquest. In the same year, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas fought the Persian army at Qadisiyyah. The Persians unleashed their war elephants in the hopes of dispersing Arab lines. The battle seesawed for 3 days. Arab archers attacked elephant riders, while their infantry held formation. By using tricks such as camouflaging camels to make them appear as terrifying beasts, the Arabs managed to strike fear into the hearts of their Persian adversaries and beat them back. On the 4th day of battle, the Arabs used a sandstorm as cover to launch a decisive assault, resulting in the death of the Persian general Rostam. The Persian army, now leaderless, dispersed, leaving their heavy equipment on the field. These successes shattered the illusion of imperial invincibility. The Arabs acquired seasoned officers, captured precious war material, and most importantly, battlefield confidence. Defectors from former Byzantine and Persian subjects, seeing the breakdown of central authority, joined them. Their familiarity with local terrain and fortresses was invaluable. The Muslim forces were strengthened by every success, and their adversaries undermined by every failure. The way to Ctesiphon, the Persian capital, lay open. The largest city in the east, the center of Persian power for 500 years, stood ready for its final test. But before the Arabs could seize their final booty, they had to accomplish what no army had ever been able to achieve in centuries: shatter the mighty defenses of the Persian capital. Following their catastrophic defeat at Qadisiyyah, the Persian remnant, led by Jalinus, marshaled the remaining men. What had been the mighty army was now a mile-long column of men retreating along the Euphrates. They had behind them units of heavy cavalry protecting the rear, and engineers demolishing bridges and blocking passes behind them. The retreat was more organized than expected. Persian generals, still disciplined despite their defeats, carried out their retreat in stages. Their rear guard launched hit-and-run attacks against pursuing Arab scouts, giving time for the main body of their army to cross the river. At each crossing, Persian engineers demolished bridges after their troops had passed over, ancient stones plunging into the Euphrates. However, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas had anticipated this delaying strategy. He divided his pursuing army into 3 columns. The largest followed hard on the heels of the Persians, keeping up a relentless pressure. 2 other forces marched parallel along the 2 banks of the Euphrates, cutting off any possibility of breaking north or south. His light cavalry probed Persian defenses every day, searching for weak points. Near the town of Babylon, the retreat erupted into open combat. Persian rearguard cavalrymen, pinned against a burnt-out bridge, turned to face their pursuers. The battle lasted for half a day. Persian heavy cavalry charged 3 times against Arab lines, striving to break through their ranks. Each time, Arab archers and spearmen repelled the attack. At nightfall, the surviving Persian horsemen broke away under cover of darkness, leaving behind their wounded and supplies. The second major battle was at Najaf. The Persians made a more elaborate ambush here. They had placed their remaining war elephants behind a narrow mountain pass, hoping to ambush pursuing Arab armies. Local guides, having changed sides, alerted Sa'd to the trap. In the hard-fought struggle, the Arabs outflanked the Persian position and killed Jalinus. His cavalry fled, leaving also their last elephants behind. However, Many of the fleeing soldiers were caught and slain by Zuhrah's riders. By sunset, the 300 Arab cavalrymen reached Najaf and halted for the night. With the goal of conquering the prosperous region of Iraq, Sa'd restructured his 20,000-strong force into 5 marching corps, keeping Zuhrah in the lead. 2 weeks after the Battle of Qadisiyyah, the rest of the army joined him at Najaf, where they received orders to cross the Euphrates. Soon after, Sassanid reinforcements led by Nakirjan, initially meant for Rostam's defeated forces, arrived. Upon hearing of the defeat, they stopped east of the Euphrates and awaited new instructions from Ctesiphon. These orders came from Firuzan, a general appointed by Emperor Yazdegerd to delay the Muslim advance. Firuzan, assessing the situation, realized his fresh and recently defeated troops wouldn't suffice to repel the Arabs. He instead set up defensive positions at various strategic locations and cities along the road to the Persian capital, buying time for the city to fortify. Firuzan's first move was to instruct the governor of Busbura, to defend his section of the Euphrates, providing him with additional troops. Meanwhile, Firuzan and his main army gathered near Babylon. As Zuhrah's advance guard approached Burs, the governor rode out to confront him. In a brief battle, the Sassanid forces were defeated, and Busbura was severely wounded, dying from his injuries during the retreat. Following this loss, the new local leader made peace with the caliphate, agreeing to offer information and logistical support. From these new allies, Zuhrah learned that the main Sassanid army was stationed across the Euphrates at Babylon, along with several high-ranking nobles. Zuhrah relayed this vital information to Sa'd at Najaf and waited for the trailing corps to catch up. Once they did, the Muslims advanced on Babylon in force and, in December 636, encountered Firuzan along the riverbank, decisively defeating his army in a brief but intense battle. One of the defeated generals, Hormuzan, fled south with his contingent to Ahwaz, while Firuzan and the remaining forces withdrew north in an orderly fashion, leaving garrisons at Sura and Dirkab. Zuhrah pursued them relentlessly, overcoming the defensive Sassanid armies at Sura, Dirkab and Kusa on his march to Ctesiphon. By early January 637, the Muslim leader reached Vologesokerta, one of the cities comprising Greater Ctesiphon, where he was rejoined by the main army. This time, the retreating Persians had not merely demolished the crossings. They set fire to the surrounding reed beds and vegetation. Smoke drifted for miles along the banks, obscuring Persian movements and creating a barrier of flames that would slow any pursuing force. But even this last desperate stratagem only postponed the inevitable. Arab engineers, by now veteran bridge builders, waited for the fires to burn out, then used the charred ground to construct new crossings in a matter of days. The Persian army that eventually materialized at Ctesiphon was hardly recognizable as the same army that had marched out to attack at Qadisiyyah. Their ranks had been reduced from 60,000 to a mere 20,000 warriors. Their elephants were gone, their baggage trains left behind, their great siege engines abandoned. But these remaining troops were still willing to defend their capital, since retreat was no longer an option. As the Arab armies closed in on Ctesiphon, the world's most beautiful metropolis stretched out before them. To the desert-dwelling Arabs, the city must have looked unlike anything they've ever seen. There were twin cities on either bank of the Tigris River, Ctesiphon on the eastern bank, Seleucia on the western. 500,000 inhabitants lived within their walls, which made it the largest city in the world at that time. Chinese, Indian, and Roman traders thronged its markets. The wealth of southern Mesopotamia's fertile plains flowed into Ctesiphon's royal treasury through an army of tax collectors. The defenses of the city seemed impenetrable. A succession of several walls encircled the city center, each one progressively higher. Deep ditches, excavated in earlier sieges, reinforced the walls. The Tigris River itself formed a natural rampart, its churning waters patrolled by Persian vessels. Ctesiphon's military importance was equaled by its cultural significance. The city housed the world's largest repository of Zoroastrian scripture. There, Persian priests tended sacred fires that had burned without interruption for centuries. The royal library housed Greek, Indian, and Chinese manuscripts, translated by scholars who had made Ctesiphon a seat of learning. The White Palace complex encircled this architectural wonder. Administrative offices contained the empire's enormous bureaucracy. Exotic flora from every part of the Persian world graced well-manicured gardens. The royal treasury contained riches gathered over the centuries: Roman territories, gold, Chinese silks, Indian spices. Yet in all of Ctesiphon, there was nothing that demanded attention like the Tak Kasra. Its massive arch towered 118 feet overhead, constructed without a single column to hold it up. Persian engineers achieved what most considered impossible: an 85-foot span made completely of mortar and brick. Its parabolic shape dispersed weight evenly, enabling the structure to stand for centuries. Stucco reliefs within showed hunting scenes and horses with wings, symbols of Persian rule. Ctesiphon's strategic value lay beyond its walls. The city commanded key trade routes on the Tigris. Its location enabled Persian armies to move quickly north into Armenia or south into the Persian Gulf. It had served as the empire's administrative capital for 5 centuries, where the King of Kings received ambassadors and issued edicts. Yet beneath this pomp, there were hints of decline. The incessant wars with Byzantium had drained the exchequer. Most aristocratic families had already withdrawn east, taking their riches and retainers with them. Young King Yazdegerd III commanded a fraction of the wealth his grandfather commanded. Still, the city's defenses remained strong, the garrison resolute. The Arabs might have defeated Persian armies in the field, perhaps, but siege warfare was a very different matter altogether. When the Arab armies pitched their camps around Ctesiphon, they were set to their severest test. They were compelled to take a city that had resisted innumerable invasions, protected by walls that had never fallen to direct attack. The siege that followed would decide not only the fate of a city, but the existence of an empire 4 centuries old. The Persians worked in advance of the time that the Arabs arrived at the walls of Ctesiphon. Engineers dug new trenches and extended older ones, forming a series of defenses designed to funnel attackers into exposed flanks. Behind these trenches stood their remaining heavy cavalry, ready to attack any attacking force that fell into these killing zones. Persian generals split the city defenses into sectors. Veterans of Qadisiyyah manned the outer walls, where their experience would be invaluable in recognizing Arab tactics. Behind them were local militia along the inner defenses. Each tower was assigned a contingent of archers and supplies of arrows. The Persians had learned from past sieges. They created a number of dumps of ammunition instead of concentrating their stores. The Persian defense was focused on the western sides. They flooded low-lying ground near the walls, transforming solid ground into perilous mud. Wooden stakes jutted out from these puddles, not seen until attacking forces would stumble upon them. The defenders plundered the countryside nearby, denying the Arabs material for siege engines. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, however, had previously learned of Persian fortifications. His army set up 3 principal camps, each located beyond catapult range. The largest faced the western walls of Ctesiphon, where the terrain presented the easiest approach. 2 smaller ones protected the north and south flanks, preventing any possibility of breakout. The Arabs built their siege lines in careful, methodical order. Each camp was an individual fortress, protected by palisades and ditches. Supply lines stretched back to recently taken Persian cities, which were now advanced bases. Arab engineers started to build siege engines, using skills learned in the Syrian campaign. Most importantly, Sa'd placed his cavalry forces in hidden positions among the camps. These mobile forces could be moved quickly to counter any Persian sortie. The Arabs had learned from the experience of past sieges. They kept up constant patrols, not allowing Persian scouts to return with information about their preparations. During the first week, the stage was set. Persian defenders watched from their walls as Arab siege towers began to take shape. Both sides knew that the battle ahead would test not just their military skills, but their ability to endure a prolonged siege. The question hanging over Ctesiphon was not if the Arabs would attack, but where they would strike first. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas arrayed his army in specialized troops. His Qadisiyyah veterans, archers, maintained a steady pressure on the walls, which made it hard for Persian defenders to emerge from cover. Syrian engineers, who had acquired Byzantine siege techniques through their extensive experience, directed the construction of 12 gigantic siege towers. The Arabs used the initial weeks to fill the defensive ditches with soil and rubble, making firm roads for their siege engines. Having prepared for 3 weeks, they began their full attack. Arab troops shoved their towers against the western walls before dawn, moving forward along 3 carefully prepared causeways that spanned the defensive ditches. They were greeted by Persian defenders with a hail of fire arrows and burning pitch. Three of the towers were ignited, their crews jumping to safety, but the other towers made it to the walls. Arab warriors poured onto the ramparts, establishing footholds at 2 key points, one close to the southwestern corner tower and another at the center of the western wall, approximately 400 yards from the main western gate. Persian counterattacks were ruinous for the Arabs. Heavy cavalry units, held in reserve behind the walls, launched through hidden sally ports. They struck the Arab attacking troops in the rear, while archers along the walls prevented reinforcements from arriving at the breaches. By evening, the Persians had closed both gaps. During the siege, local Jewish and Christian communities in Ctesiphon played important parts. Some gave the Arabs details of weak points in the defenses. Others trafficked goods to Muslim camps. The Persians, finding out about this collaboration, executed some of the merchants who were prominent, but the information flow persisted. The supply system of the Arabs was highly efficient. They had turned over conquered Persian estates to forward bases. Camel trains carried supplies from as far away as Basra. When the Persians sought to cut off these supply lines with cavalry raids, Arab mobile forces responded quite effectively using their desert warfare skills. 2 months elapsed before Sa'd changed his tactics. He abandoned direct attack and resorted to systematic bombardment of certain sections of the walls. His engineers developed better catapults based on Persian machines captured at Qadisiyyah. These catapults threw larger stones more accurately, slowly weakening the defenses. The Persians responded with their own engineering innovations. They supported breached walls with ramparts of earth. Their sappers countered by digging counter-tunnels, intercepting Arab efforts to undermine the walls. At strategic locations, they built wooden platforms overhanging the walls, enabling defenders to drop stones directly onto attackers. The turning point was when local Arab tribes from the neighboring areas joined the siege. Their familiarity with the land was priceless. They guided them to hidden water sources and pointed out weak spots in Ctesiphon's southern walls. More importantly, their participation severed Persian communication lines with the other cities and exposed the capital entirely to isolation. The last stage of the Ctesiphon siege began in early March 637. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas commanded a concerted assault on 3 points at once. Arab siege engines pounded western walls for 6 hours before sunrise. The crash of stone on ancient walls resounded over the battlefield. Cracks first appeared in the southwestern wall, then a great part by the western gate collapsed, stones crashing down amid a cloud of dust. Persian defenders hastened to the breaches, frantically striving to fill the gaps with wooden beams and rubble. From the still-standing towers, their archers rained arrows upon the advancing Arab army. When sufficient breaches were opened, waves of fighters attacked each of the 3 points. The Persians held firm at first, but their strength had been pared down by months of siege. The breakthrough occurred at the southwest corner. Arab sappers, digging through the night, caused a 30-foot section of outer wall between 2 guard towers to collapse. The earth under the wall gave way, taking a stretch of the great fortification that had remained upright for centuries with it. As Persian troops hastened to seal this new gap, Sa'd assaulted in earnest the northern sector, where weeks of bombardment had already broken through the defenses. The Arab warriors stormed through the weakened northern gap, securing first the wall itself and then the neighboring towers. From these, their archers gave cover, while more troops moved forward into the city. Street by street, building by building, they battled their way into the northern quarter of Ctesiphon, turning each building they captured into a defensive strongpoint. By nightfall, the Arabs had established a firm foothold within the city itself. Despondent, Yazdegerd III ordered a desperate counterattack. What was left of the Persian heavy cavalry, along with the palace guards, attacked the Arab forces which had gained entrance through the northern breach. The fighting lasted for 5 hours. The Persians fought like men defending their capital, but the Arab reinforcements just kept streaming in through the gap. By nightfall, both the northern and southwestern sectors of the outer walls were in Arab hands. Persian defenders withdrew behind the inner fortifications and abandoned the western half of the city. That night, Yazdegerd III, realizing the futility of his situation, ordered the royal treasury to be evacuated and readied for transport. With the Muslims having deeply penetrated into the city, the last day saw bitter urban combat. Persian units fought street by street, buying time for civilians to flee across the Tigris. The Arabs advanced methodically, securing each sector before pushing forward. When night fell over Ctesiphon, Persian resistance in the western city had collapsed completely. Under the cover of night, Yazdegerd III and the few remaining Persian nobles took flight to the east, with whatever treasure they could carry. At this point, all hopes of Ctesiphon's defense was crushed. The magnificent Tak Kasra Palace, 5 centuries of Persian history, and any hope of arresting the Arab advance were all left behind. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas himself entered Ctesiphon the next morning. The greatest city in the east had fallen. The fall of Ctesiphon crushed what remained of Persian resistance. The bounty was rich. The Arabs seized enormous amounts of weapons, gold, and priceless manuscripts. More importantly, the loss of their capital broke Persian morale. Though Yazdegerd III would continue in his resistance in the eastern provinces, Sassanid Empire from now on practically ceased to be a single political unit. The fall of Ctesiphon shook the known world. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas had finally secured as great a prize as any conqueror could imagine. In this palace complex, the Arab forces found extensive treasuries, ancient Persian kings' crowns, gold from Roman campaigns, and silks transported along Chinese caravans faced the Arabs. The accumulation of wealth of 5 centuries fell into Arab hands. And more profound was the cultural effect. The Arabs retained much of what they found at Ctesiphon, most notably the gigantic library with collections of Greek, Indian, and Persian texts that helped scholarship in Islam for centuries. The Persian know-how in architecture, which was reflected in buildings such as Tak Kasra, with its intricate carvings and designs, would influence Islamic style for centuries to come, and is still visible in various countries nowadays, from Spain to India. The administrative machinery of the Persian Empire buckled. Tax collectors, scribes, and officials previously in the employ of Sassanids now swore allegiance to the caliphate. Many of them brought with them their valuable experience and initiated the Arab administrators into the somewhat complex systems by which an empire was governed. The efficient bureaucracy of Persians became a model for the swelling Muslim state. In desperation, Yazdegerd III fled to the eastern provinces in an attempt at rallying support, but the loss of Ctesiphon proved fatal to Persian unity. The local governors, seeing that their king was in flight, began negotiating separate surrenders. The Arab armies pressed eastward, city after city, falling with barely any resistance. For the Muslim armies, however, the capture of Ctesiphon represented more than a military triumph. They had overcome one of the great empires of the world, proved their tactical superiority, and acquired substantial resources to fuel expansion. In less than decades, Arab armies would reach as far as Central Asia and the borders of China. The fall of Ctesiphon brought about the end of 5 centuries of Persian rule. The Sassanid Empire, which had fought Rome to a standstill and ruled from Egypt to India, crumbled within years of the Arab conquest. Let us now return west to Palestine, where we left off after the Battle of Yarmouk. There, the armies of Abu Ubaidah and Khalid ibn Al-Walid rested following their triumphs over the Romans at Yarmouk. Their victory had broken Byzantine power in Syria, but several key cities remained in Byzantine hands. Antioch, Caesarea, and Jerusalem stood defiant, their garrisons threatening Muslim control over the newly conquered lands. As news of Ctesiphon's capture reached their camp, Abu Ubaidah and Khalid began planning their next move. Initially undecided about their next target, the Rashidun generals asked Caliph Umar for a decision. Caliph's answer was simple: take Jerusalem. Jerusalem, in 637, stood as a fortress city of immense significance. Its walls protected Christianity's holiest sites, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built over Christ's tomb. For Jews, the Temple Mount held the ancient site of Solomon's Temple. For Muslims, it was the third holiest city in Islam, where Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. Taking Jerusalem would not only secure Muslim control over the holiest city on earth, but also establish tighter dominance over Syria and open the path to Egypt. Follow us on our next journey as we dive into the next chapter of the Islamic conquest. Thanks, folks, for watching. Creating these documentaries takes a lot of effort and dedication. Your subscriptions and comments not only support our work, but also help push the algorithm to reach more viewers. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others. Thank you for your support, and click on one of these videos to continue the adventure.